All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, wherever you are in the world, whenever you are watching this. Hello and coffee cheers. And I am Stephanie. Your coffee cup does not have a cold saying on it. What the heck?
Oh.
So I have got Stephanie live with me again this week for part two. And hey, Mom, good morning. This is a purely selfish episode as I realized I didn't even know that much about Stephanie and how she found Pilates. Good morning, Tammy. What led her there and what has inspired her to be a Pilates instructor. So, Steph, take it away. And I'm going to be ADD for a moment again. Good morning, Karen. So, if you guys have any questions at all that are listening in, you can put them in the comments. And now I'm going to let Stephanie talk about her. Here we go.
So Pilates, I first came across Pilates over 20 years ago, and I was always a mover. As a kid, I danced. I loved moving way more than indoor activities. So when my family left Zimbabwe, we immigrated to Australia, and it was in my last year of high school. And my mum joined a gym and she signed me up. And the one day I just went with her and we went to do a Pilates class. Now, so I did that 2003 and I enjoyed it. But the biggest thing that I realized in hindsight, like I didn't know it at the time because you're just kind of in the moment, was it leaving my home was a much bigger emotional deal than I realized at the time. And what Pilates was doing, even just there was a big group class at the gym. I was moving, which is something I loved, but it was also really helping me to connect back to myself and to connect with other people too. Because we literally moved to Australia. There was no like runway plan, nothing. It was just like, we're going. And we
Wow.
went. And my whole, like everything from 9 years old to 18, my childhood, it was just bye bye.
Oh, so you had no time to process anything. It's like all of a sudden you're in another country.
Yeah, yeah. Having said that, my family did keep our home, and my dad still lives there in Zimbabwe. But and I was mostly excited about it because I was like, oh, I was like 17, 18, and
Yeah.
Australia, this is cool. But there was a part of me that I was a little numb to that I only realize now in
Yeah.
hindsight that was grieving hugely, hugely. So then I completed my last year of high school in Australia, and then came the what are you going to do? And I did not know. I just had my mum in the back of my head saying, you should do a degree in accounting because it's good to understand money and how to manage money. So I did. It was awful.
Good morning, Roz.
You couldn't have picked a more opposite like it was the hardest 3.5 years of my life.
Yeah. Plus,
I,
okay, I know that Stephanie does not know how to count. Not in a really, I'm not offending her. Numbers are just not her thing. She's so energetic. So I can't imagine you going through 3.5 years of accounting. Oh my
it,
God.
it was a slog. It was a slog, and I was not happy. I wasn't happy. I wasn't loving what I was doing. I
How
was
was your body at that time? Like, if you look back, do you recall how your body was then?
Yeah, it was like a hamster on a wheel. It was stressed out. Um uh,
Yeah.
was so stressed actually that my cycle stopped. I stopped,
Yeah.
like I was really not in a good, and like I said, I didn't, other than my cycle stopping, I didn't realize how
Yeah.
stressed I actually was.
Well, that's the thing is it's like the frog in the frying pan. You get so conditioned to a level of stress. Hey, Carmen, good morning. And then you just that becomes a new level. And then you become okay with it, and then it increases and you just keep feeling okay with it, and you don't even recognize how far from okay you have gotten. And your body is such a lighthouse, so to speak, where it starts to really show you and guide you if you are willing to listen to it and not judge it as wrong.
Completely, completely. And at the time, like I was just, everyone, there was this emphasis on you've got to get a good job, you've got to, it was just so much pressure. And because my family had moved over there, I also felt that pressure a little bit more because they'd done that for my brother and I, and now we better.
Yeah. You better.
But I realized about a year and a half into that degree that this is this is not going to work. At the time, I was still attending Pilates classes at the gym. So it's a very different setting to how I teach now. And it was just mats. I had no idea there was equipment. Like in my world at the time, Pilates was just this session on a mat. That was it. And I went with my mom and friends. And then the one day, I was in a class and I wasn't happy. And I thought, the one thing that I do enjoy doing is this. And the instructor, I asked her, and she was like, oh, she was about to prepare, or she was in the process of making her own teacher training course. So I enrolled in the first ever Art of Motion course in 2000 and, oh gosh, I think it was 2006.
Wow.
And what is so cool and kind of crazy, and I worked for them too, today, so I was there at the grassroots of this training. It's now huge. It's international. It's worldwide. It's based.
Wow.
It's very different to how I teach Pilates today because it's not classical. That it was just pretty cool to be there at the beginning of this creation.
Yeah.
Oh, huge. Yeah, yeah. And I worked for them, so I did that, and then I started teaching at like in Australia, in Perth at the time. I taught at gyms and I taught at recreation centers. And I was so keen just to get experience. I would drive. I had no sense of, well, that's a little far. It makes no sense to drive all the way there to teach one. Yeah. I remember getting home sometimes at 9 o'clock at night because I drove like an hour away to teach one class and come back.
But you were willing to do whatever it took because you loved it and you knew that that was something that fed you, fed your being, that made you feel good. And so it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, but you just knew that
Yeah,
that was, yeah. Good morning, Marilyn.
yep, exactly. So that's what I did. I drove all over Perth teaching classes. And the funniest place I ever taught at to this day, I don't know if I told you the story, but it was at a recreation center and it was in a creche. They gave me the creche. It was so stinky because nappies and everything, and I don't know, it was always smelly in there, and it always had like things dangling from the ceiling like stars, and so we had to dodge stars, we had to dodge houses. So it was the funniest place I've ever taught at, and I taught there for a little bit once a week, and then I got my degree, which was blood, sweat and tears, and
That's the accounting degree.
yep, got BCom, majored in accounts and finance. And I don't know, do not ask me. I always say to people, you would fire me. I got that through pure hurting and just prayers. So, and then I just continued teaching more classes, and I just loved it so much. I enrolled in another form of still Pilates, but training called Polestar, and Polestar was already quite big. Polestar Pilates came from a more clinical perspective on Pilates, and now where I was doing that training, I remember going into there and, oh, there were these machines.
Oh.
I still didn't touch them though. I still only did the mat, and I don't know why, but they didn't intrigue me at the time. Like really, I guess because I was probably only teaching mat, and there was nowhere where I was teaching that had equipment. And then I enjoyed doing the pole star course, and I just wanted more. I just wanted more. The body fascinated me, and I wasn't doing any private sessions yet. It was all just groups still. That was kind of like how it went in the early 2000s. And then my family moved back to Botswana. It's complicated. And I was left in Australia on my own to finish my degree. I get a bit, the timeline.
Yeah.
And anyway, but when I finished the degree, I knew I did not want to stay in Australia.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it was I, I was emotionally stressed.
Yeah.
And I had moved, and I didn't want to be there anymore. And I went on holiday to see them, and I met Ross.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I had to go back to Australia to finish one of my Pilates courses and a few other things. But then, literally 6 months after that, I moved back to Botswana because we've lived in Botswana too. And that was that. Never been back. And
Oh.
started teaching in Botswana, renting space at a physio, teaching at a gym there too. And that's when I started private sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So still at this stage, I hadn't done any equipment training.
Right.
But there was a reformer at the physio's place. And I don't know, you kind of get on it, you put your feet in the straps and you go, ooh, it can do this. Not how you, I don't recommend it, but this is what, yeah. And so I never taught anyone on it. I just got on it every now and then for me and kind of was like curious.
Yeah.
Curious enough again still to enroll in anything. Anyway, long story short, Ross and I eventually moved to South Africa. Ross moved back, I moved with him, and I started teaching there. And now studios there were equipped.
Cool.
So this was now 2014. And so the first studio that I worked at there, they were awesome. They knew I didn't have, I was like, I don't have training on these, but I learn quickly. If you give me the book, and then I can see when I can register for the training to do the course in these. Yeah. I did, and I did a STOT reformer course and loved that aspect now. And yeah, and then a couple of years later, when we started getting interested in Canada, actually, I was.
What started getting you interested in Canada?
Well, we knew. So I think a lot of people living in South Africa think like this. You economically and politically, it's not very stable, and you can't save money fast enough to beat inflation. And just we knew that it wasn't a wise move to kind of commit to building a life there.
Yeah.
Up leaving. So yeah, and although I'm Australian and British, I don't know what we could have gone to those countries. They just didn't interest.
And then you come to Canada where it's -50.
The weather's the only downer. That's it. But so I was chatting to Pilates and forums and everything, and I came across one Cara, and she said to me, she's like, you should get classically trained because it's very rare, and there's so many contemporary teachers out there. And I didn't even know what she was talking about. I was like,
Right.
what? Like, I thought Pilates was Pilates. I had, there were the two, contemporary and classical. Like, my mind was blown. I'm like, what do you mean? Huh? And I was shocked that I actually found a classical trainer in Johannesburg, and she was amazing and brilliant. And that's when I started my classical training, which blew my mind, because it combines everything. There's no just mat, there's no just reformer. It's how everything works together. And like anything, it contextualizes everything. So you can understand why people that haven't done classical don't get where we're coming from, because it's like the news zooms in on one little thing, but if you zoom out and look at it as a whole picture, it's actually
Yeah.
entirely. So I just, and my body just knew, my gut knew this was it. This is the real deal. Because funny enough, throughout teaching, I was feeling a little frustrated. And the frustration was that I felt like all these other methods had their own, all the contemporaries, you must do it like this. And
Mhm.
I never felt, I always thought, no, that you can't say that, because you're going to get a body that's totally, that's not appropriate for. And
Yeah.
I always that it was the previous training I had done was more about the method and then the person.
Yeah, and that's what I actually really love about you, Stephanie, is I can recognize, especially now, Helena, she's been coming to classes, my mom, Travis and Trace, and each one of us is so different. And I can see how Stephanie tailors the Pilates principles to each body individually.
Yeah. And that's and then I went, when I started the classical training, I was so excited because that's what they taught us.
Yeah,
They
totally.
they were like, this is you, even to the point of what piece of equipment to use for someone, based on not just physically either. This is also what I nerd out on, because it's so interesting. They're like, observe this person, how they move, what are they wearing, what's their emotionally, how are they? That'll even determine how.
Like even taking into consideration the emotions
Hmm?
like of the so you are wow. I was actually so Trace has just started coming to group classes and my son, he's 13. And he doesn't it's so funny because he doesn't do the movements totally the way that we're supposed to be doing them. I look over at him and I'm like, Catherine, this is not your class to teach. And I just keep doing my thing and I allow Stephanie and I were chatting about this the other day, and she's like, Catherine, like it's a journey. It's everybody has their journey with their body. And she can tell when it's time to make a correction or a suggestion. And then there's time to let the person figure out their journey with their body awareness. And especially with kids and younger people, they learn differently, they absorb differently. And I'm like, Steph, you're awesome. um, and I've struggled with that even teaching, especially my kids riding lessons, or teaching them something. I expect them to do it the way that I do, but that's not necessarily right for them. So yeah, I
And
really appreciated that about you.
that aspect of teaching is also something that took me a while to really kind of let go and let it happen, because you especially in the beginning, you're taught looks like this, blah 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 blah, but that's not, that's not how people in the beginning are going to. It's going to look messy sometimes, and that's fine as long as people are moving safely and there's no
Yeah.
safety. It's not picture perfect, it's just not, and people's nervous systems learn differently.
Yes, that.
And the most important thing out of everything, it's not about perfect Pilates. Pilates is positive. You never want to make someone feel like a fool.
Yeah.
Or, if this is all their body can do today, and this is the awareness they have in their body today, then this is the best today. You keep going, and I think that's like with anything, right? But I really learned that in the classical training, and it just, I mean, even yeah, just the way, we were taught it was so much more about people. And yes, you're taught how to teach a system and you're taught the exercises, but the crux of it comes down to the person. And I was like, yes, this makes sense. And also what I really enjoyed about the classical, which the other ones didn't give me, was the focus on the internal aspect of it, that this is actually
Yes.
for stimulating circulation, lymph, your guts, your this isn't just about, well, let's tone the butt, which it does, but
Yeah.
it's the reasons why we're engaging from the powerhouse outwards, so from your stomach, your back, your butt, all of those, is to your organs sit in these areas.
Mhm.
Actual physical, internal aspect to this work that was never taught to me before. In fact, before it was like very, very anatomical and very kind of just, too, what's the word? I want to say medicinal, but I don't think that's the right word. Removed from the human. Like you are almost like you are only a skeleton and muscles. And that's not at all how we operate. Um, and yeah, so I just and that's what keeps me or has me so passionate about the classical Pilates in particular. And then why I struggle to sometimes watch other forms of Pilates being taught, because sure, it's not, you're going to get benefit from it,
Mhm.
but I can see that
It can
it
be greater.
yeah, that's it. It
Yeah.
can be so much greater. And I think that for me is a big thing. The whole person, body, mind, and spirit. You're not just there to make sure they inhale and exhale correctly. Well, no.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steph. I really enjoyed this inside look at your adventure. And so, again, for anybody watching in the future, I will include Stephanie's contact information in the description of this video. If you're ever curious or interested, reach out to her. And yeah, any last words, Steph?
I think, you know, saying, and it's so true, different strokes for different folks. Pilates is amazing. But sometimes when people get going initially, it can take a couple of months. So you hear all these amazing things about it, and then you get going, and you're like, I'm really strong. I even had someone admit to me once that the first couple of months she hated it. So it's worth giving it a go.
And
But
commit for a little bit. Yeah.
time to get into your body, and then it goes from dislike to obsession. From
Yes. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, well, thanks again. And thank you, everybody, for joining us live and watching in the future. And if you have any questions, you know what to do. And we'll see you guys later.